Today, we are going to be looking at integrating FileMaker and SharePoint using the Microsoft Graph API. Before we get started, you'll want to make sure that you have a site created in SharePoint. Microsoft has great documentation on this process, so I highly recommend following their steps if you need to create a SharePoint site. Once you're ready to go, we will need to set up a Microsoft application that will allow us to use OAuth 2.0 to communicate between SharePoint and FileMaker. To set up your Microsoft application, you will want to navigate to the Microsoft Azure portal. We are then going to want to navigate to Microsoft Entra ID and then app registrations. Once you are on this screen, you'll see a list of your current applications. If you have one that you would like to use for this integration, it should work just fine. To update an existing application to match the settings we'll be using, you can go to Manage, Authentication within your existing app. To create a new app registration, we'll choose this New Registrations option. You can set the name to something that makes sense to your company. For the sake of this integration, we're going to just call it the FileMaker SharePoint integration. For supported account types, we're going to want to be sure to choose the second option here, as it will allow us to authenticate into our app. Now, the redirect URI is going to be the web page that users will go to after they allow access to our SharePoint application. We're just going to be using the redirect URI that can be found in the sample file of this demo. Now, one thing that's important to keep in mind is that your URL must be valid and encoded. So for example, Microsoft does not allow any URLs that have spaces in them. For our platform, we're going to want to choose web. And again, if you're updating an existing application, this can also be updated by going to Manage and Authentication. Now, we're going to want to ensure that we've saved all of our changes we've currently made. For new applications, we'll do so by clicking Register. For existing ones, you should have save options somewhere on the screen. Now that we've done so, and we are now on the overview, we're going to want to take note of one piece of information on this screen. We're going to want to be sure to grab this application and client ID. We can do that just by copying to our clipboard and then using that to populate this field here in our FileMaker demo file. Now that we have our client ID, we're going to need to generate a client secret. You can do so by either clicking this client credentials link or by going to Manage, Certificates, and Secrets. We can go ahead and click this new client secret button here. And again, you can enter a description for whatever makes sense to you. For me, I'm just going to call it the FileMaker secret. Now, when it expires is again another option that you have. You can go from anywhere from 3 months to 2 years. For this, I'm just going to keep it the recommended 6 months. And then I'm going to click Add. Now, as soon as I have this available, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste it into FileMaker. This is because, as it says here in Azure, as soon as we navigate away from this page, we will no longer be able to view this secret. So it's important to go ahead and grab it while we have it available to us. And if we look in our list of steps here, in our API permissions, we're going to want to ensure that the following delegated permissions are set up for our app. And we can see here that we have a list of 4 permissions that we're going to want to give. Now, if we go back into Azure and go under Manage API Permissions, we can see that we already have one of those granted to us. So now all we need to do is click Add a Permission, and we're going to choose Microsoft Graph and Delegated Permissions. And now we can start selecting them. For our first permission, we're going to want to be sure to have the files read write all. Now we can see under Files, we can check this one. Next is going to be Sites read write all. Now we can also check that. We already have our user.read, and so then the last permission we will need is offline access. And once we do that, we can click Add Permissions, and we will see that all 4 have been added. Now that we've gotten everything ready on the Azure side, we can go back to FileMaker and start working with our integration. We'll want to make sure to check off this step because we have done so, and now we can click Go to Example. Now we have quite a few more fields to be working with, but the first step we're going to have to take is to click Authenticate. Now we will see here that there are some permissions required, and that is okay. Basically just making sure that we're not giving any sketchy thing access to our stuff. Once we hit Accept, we'll see that we have gone to our redirect URI that we specified, and FileMaker will pull in all of this information for us. Our site host and site ID should have something that matches what our Azure site is, our SharePoint site. And then we will see that we have our access code, account token, and refresh token. That way we'll have all of those available to us for whatever we need. Now I can go ahead and click Get Drive ID, as now that we know what site we're going to, we can pull our specific drive information. Basically, we need to be able to tell our Microsoft Graph API where we want to upload our file in our SharePoint. Now we are ready to upload a document. If I go ahead and click this Upload Doc button here, I can grab and insert a test PDF to use. We'll know it's successful because this document ID will be populated, and if we go into our SharePoint site, we can view in our documents that we have a new upload. Now, in addition to uploading documents to SharePoint, we can also retrieve documents from SharePoint into FileMaker. Using our same authentication session, we can ask the Microsoft Graph API to retrieve everything that we have in our root folder in SharePoint and then bring it into FileMaker. By clicking on Get Docs, we send a request to the API to first see how many files and folders that we have in that root SharePoint path. Once we confirm that we would like all of these imported into FileMaker, we can then loop through each item, and FileMaker will save those files. Now, Microsoft Graph sends back a JSON block of information about all files and folders inside of your SharePoint directory. As part of this, we also get a specific direct link to our files. On the back end, we can use an insert from URL script step with FileMaker and also parse out the JSON from Microsoft Graph to actually save our test files into our FileMaker solution. If you're looking to integrate Microsoft SharePoint with your FileMaker solution, feel free to contact DB Services, and we'll be more than happy to help you.